Let's now take a look at variables. And as stated in our notes, variables are containers that store values. JavaScript lets us declare variables using the var, let, and const declarations. So you can see here in our previous example that I used a const to store my query selector for my paragraph. And when you use const, it's basically the short for constant. So this variable will not change over time, right? So let's take a look at how to declare a variable. And as mentioned before, you can use var or let, and it is less recommended that you use the var keyword. With the introduction of ECMAScript 2015 or ES6, the let keyword was introduced, and this allowed us to prevent what is known as variable hoisting. And to just give you a quick example of why the let keyword was introduced, let's say I wanted to declare a variable. So let's use the var keyword and say my name is equal to Mary. And if I want to redeclare a variable and use my name equals to Patricia. So let me save this. And if I run this in the browser, if I click on refresh, we can see there are no errors in the console. So if I wanted to do a console.log of my name, we'd see here that it logs Patricia to the console. Okay, so this is not the best behavior because you may not want that to happen. It can make your code very confusing and you know, downright annoying. So it's kind of a issue that ES6 has fixed, introducing the let keyword. So it does not allow you to redeclare the same variable with a different value. And let me just simply say let new name and let Blake, sorry. And if I want to do a console log of new name and I save this, when I refresh my browser, I now get an error. So it's telling me uncaught syntax error, right? The new name has already been declared. So this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Like I said, declaring a variable after you have already initialized it results in harder to understand code. It will be very confusing. So the let keyword doesn't allow you to redeclare variables. So that's pretty much all you need to know about the var and let. So moving forward, we will mainly be using the let keyword to declare our variables. So let's remove these two lines. And what you actually can do is assign a new value. So let's just say we declared new name to equal Jake. And at a later point in time, we wanted to change the value of new name to Blake, right? So if we do a console log before and after, let's refresh. right? So you can see the first console log, Jake is printed, and the second time around, let's make this slightly bigger. Right, so the second time around, Blake is printed. All right, so you can change a variable after it has been declared. And just some different ways you can declare variables. You can declare numbers, so we can say let my variable equals 10. Right, so that's an integer. If we want to say decision, we can say true. We can even declare arrays like this. So we can say let my array equals, and we would use the square brackets. So we can have 1 or 16 Marsha, and of course we separate it with commas. All right, so that is an array. And if we wanted to print any value of the array, of course we can do a console log. And we can say my array and print the position we want. So arrays start at position 0, right? So 16 would be at position 0, Marsha would be at position 1, Stephen at 2, and our final, fourth and final would be at position 3. So if I wanted to print Marsha, I would print a console log at what is at position 1. Save this. And of course we get Marsha printed. Same thing if we wanted to do position 4. Of course we get an error because it's undefined. So of course position 3. Save that. Do a refresh and we get our double. So that is essentially how you do variable declaration in JavaScript. And here at the beginning, we already declared our object. So this is how we would save an object. And we could still use the let keyword here to get our document query selector for whatever element we want to select in our HTML. However, usually you'll find it'll be better to use const to do that, as we don't really expect a variable to be any different. For instance, if we're selecting an ID, let's just say our paragraph had an ID, and this is our demo. We could also say const and let us just remove this for now. And let's just call it my para as well. Equals to, and we can say document dot get element by ID. And here it is right here. And of course, our element is demo. And we can essentially do the same thing that we did before with our element. We can set this equal to, we are learning code with JavaScript. It's easy and fun. All right, because JavaScript is indeed easy and fun once you practice the code. All right, so this should essentially do the same thing, only now we're selecting the ID, and we know that an ID is unique to an element. So since there's no other element that could possibly be using an ID of demo, then we store it in a const, because we don't expect the value for my paragraph to change at any point in time. All right, so we would use the get element by ID and select the ID. And of course, we can put any text content that we desire as a string. So now that we have saved this, let us test it out. And here you see, we have indeed printed that to the screen. So that is pretty much a rundown of the different variable types that we can use within Java. And just a note, in order to do a comment in Java, you can do it two ways. You can either do it this way for a multi-line comment, and anything between this line will be commented, meaning commented out, meaning that JavaScript will not read it. So this will not executed. So this is multi-line commenting. And of course, let's say I wanted to comment out my console log. I use console log a lot when I'm doing testing, just to see if variables have correct values, etc. So I'll console log a lot of different things, such as variables, JSON objects, API responses, etc. I'll console log them just to ensure I'm getting the correct response. And then once I'm seeing that it's being logged to the console, so right now we see here we're getting a console log. If I comment this line out and save it and refresh, we no longer, JavaScript no longer executes that line of code. So these are the two different ways that you can use comments in JavaScript. Let's continue looking at some variables and operators in JavaScript. We can define variables and do addition. So let's just say we want two numbers, num1 equals 5, 2 is equal to 12. And we can then say let result equals num1 plus num2. And then we can do a console log of our results. So let us save this. And remember, the file name has changed. I've changed it to variables and operators.html. So I'll have to change this. Okay, so we get 17 with our addition. If we wanted the result in our HTML, we could, this time let's use an h3 tag. And let's give it an ID of my result. And as we did before, we can store our element in a variable, a constant. Let's call it my header equals document. get element by ID. And of course, our ID in this case is my result. And let's end this with a semicolon. And let's come down here. And let us actually say my header dot, and we can also use inner HTML. And we can just say result. And let's save this. Do a refresh. And we get an error. So the error says, okay, inner HTML is not a function. Oh, my bad. It's not the way you'd write this. You would need the equal, right? So my header.innerHTML equals result. So this is not a function, so we'd have to use the equal operator. Let's save that again, refresh. And there we have 17 printed out in our header tag. All right, so we see several different ways we can get our result, and pretty much we can do several different types of operations. So we can say, let the difference equal num2 minus num1. We can say division equals num2 divided by num1, and also, and we want the product to be equal num1, and we use the asterisk as our multiplication sign, num2, and I'm simply going to console log. So I'm gonna paste these, so we need the difference. And we can just change this to sum because we're finding the sum of the two numbers. So change that to sum. Let us save it and we run it. All right, so we get our results and also an error saying result is not defined in line 25. So let's fix that, line 25. Right, so this would need to be sum. Okay, so before we do that, let us also include a string. So let's say let my string equals the product of the is and in my header.innerHTML I want to change this to my string, and I'm going to join or concatenate using the plus and concatenate the product. So product. All right, so we can add strings or concatenate strings to numbers. And let's save this and let us take a look. Right, so the product of the numbers is 60. Okay, great. All right, so those are some of the basic operators that we have available to us, not just in JavaScript, but in any programming language. And now we can take a look at some of our comparison or equality operators. So we can do a check, and we can pretty much do a check between two numbers. So we already have num1 and num2. So I am going to do a console log. And like I said, console log is very useful. So we'll be using it quite a bit throughout the course. And we are going to say num1, and we're going to use our equality operator, which is a triple equals num2. And can you guess what will be output in the console once we do that? Right, so is num1 equal to num2? Let's save it and see what we get. So we do a refresh, and of course we're going to get a false because obviously num2 is greater than num1. So if we change this to greater and refreshed, we would still get false. If we change this to less than, this should evaluate to true. So let us save this, refresh, and of course it evaluates to true. So this is one way we can check equality with our operators. We can also check not equal with our exclamation and then double equal sign. And if you can guess, do a refresh. Of course, this evaluates to true because obviously num1 is not equal to num2. So this statement will evaluate to true. We also have an operator called Modulus Operator. So we can just say let remainder. So modulus actually does a division, and whatever the remainder is what the modulus actually stores. So if we do num2, and the modulus operator is the percent sign, so we say modulus num1, meaning if we divide 12 by 5, will we have a remainder? And to check this, we can, of course, check for a remainder, save it. And we see here that the remainder is 2, which is in fact true. 5 into 12 goes 2 times, remain a 2. So many times you will see different programs wanting you to check if there's actually a remainder. So what we can do to do a check if there's a remainder is to basically say if remainder is equal to 0, obviously there is no remainder. So we know when we divide even numbers by, if we're looking for prime numbers rather, then if there's no remainder, then we know what is a prime number and what is not a prime number. All right, so if we evaluate this statement, remainder is equal to 0, obviously we're going to get false, right? So we know that definitely when we divide these two numbers, there will be a remainder. One more thing I'd like to look at is an object type. So we've been looking at different variables, and we can also create objects in JavaScript. So let us create an object, and I'm going to call it pet. And my pet, we can have type. And this is how we create objects with key value pairs. So type would be dog. Then we can have name. Sparky. and let's have a breed. And let's say he is a pit bull. All right, so here we have our object, and if we wanted to get any element using our key value pairs of pet, we can say, and we're going to create another string, or we can actually change the string here. So let us say the name of my pet is, so this is our string that will be printed to our H3 element. The name of my pet is, and instead of product, I can simply say pet and use our dot notation. And you can see here, I have 3 properties in my pet object, and it's breed, name, and type. So the name of my pet is pet.name, and Control S to save. And of course, the name of my pet is Sparky. Okay, so you can go ahead and, check and ensure that these other values do work. So we're using name already, pet.type, and let me just copy this. And we can say pet.breed and save it. And we see here that the type is a dog, the breed is a pit bull, and his name is Sparky.